everyone, this is Take from bigheadtaco.com and welcome to BHD Studios. This is my first shooting impressions with the brand new Fujifilm X100V. I did an unboxing and first thoughts. I did a video test which I was pretty darn impressed with, and now this is my actual shooting impressions out and about on the streets, as well as sort of a comparison. I'm getting a lot of questions. People are saying, you know, I have the X100F, should I get the V? I've also been getting questions like, which one should I get, the X100V or the X Pro 3? Very different cameras. And as well as comparing the X100V with the Leica Q, the new Q. And again, two very different cameras, but I'll try to answer those as much as I can, but more importantly, talk specifically about the X100V. What are my impressions of it in comparison to these other cameras, and where it sort of sits within the Fujifilm's ecosystem, as well as sort of what's out there currently available, and then sort of pros, cons, and if I'm gonna get one or not. So let's start the video now. Alright, so first things first, what I was actually most impressed about the X100V, other than its looks, but I shouldn't say that because all the X100s have been pretty, it's been more modernized with straighter lines. This little leatherette kind of goes straight across, where the older version, it's kind of, you know, it dips down a little bit, but I mean, you know, this is a very pretty camera, and no matter where you go, people are going to be interested. Say, hey, you know, what camera is that? Blah blah blah. I have the WCL, the wide angle converter, on here because I do personally prefer the 28mm equivalent sort of field of view. That's why I have an affinity towards the Ricoh GR system. You do have to put this adapter on, which makes it a little bit clunkier and bigger and heavier, but not overly big or not overly heavy, but aesthetically just a very beautiful camera. It reminds myself, as well as a lot of people, of the Leica rangefinder cameras, right? And that's kind of that vintage vibe that you get off of the X100V. But other than the looks, which is important to some people, what I really was impressed is the firmware, which basically comes from the new X processor 4. And so we know that that processor first appeared on the XT3, and then the XT30, the X Pro 3, the GFX 100, and now it is on the XT4 and the X100V. And so a lot of the firmware and improvements in the overall processing power, so you get 4K video on here, and you get the improved autofocus, not just speed, but accuracy. And so shooting video, as I showed in my talking head review video, it's perfect for talking head. The only sort of caveat I would say is to not put the microphone on top up here, like if you have a boom microphone, but put it on the tripod. I'll insert something here where I show how I used it on a monopod, and I put a little magic arm further away from the body so you don't hear the lens, because the lens is a little bit noisy, but the other X100 lenses were always a little bit noisy. You're not going to get that same stealth, quiet, and fast and accurate autofocus that you would get on one of the Fujicrons, the XF23 F2, which is often what people compare the X100V's lens with, because it is the same field of view, and it is the, well, field of view, focal length, and the same f2 aperture. So the first thing I would notice, and I think a lot of you guys would notice, is when you go from the X100F to the V, is that firmware. Everything's improved in here. As well as the new film simulations and some of the autofocus features in here, like all that's just been improved. So that's kind of the number one thing that I noticed in here. So you get my favorite classic neg in here, but there's all the other ones that have been missing from the previous version. So the new lens, again, maybe I'll just take this off here. But I do really like the X100 with this converter. The WCL is better than the TCL, the telephoto converter, that 50 f2 equivalent. It's big, it's bulky, it's not that sharp. Autofocus seems to hunt with that because I think if they made it into either a 45 f2.8 or f2.4 and made it as small as this, it'd be more useful. And so if you were going to get one of the two, I think this makes more sense, getting the 28, the wide angle converter. Having this new lens, the previous lens on the X100F was not the sharpest, especially up close and wide open. it reminded me of the Fujicron, the XF23 f2 Fujicron, where up close and wide open lens definitely was not sharp. And so they improved on this quite a bit, and I would say that I tested this lens up close and wide open against the XF23 f2, sharper. From medium distance, sharper. So this is an improved lens, not only over the XF20, the lens in the X100F and the previous, because from the original X100 to the F, it's been the same lens, right? And so we knew that lens was getting old. We wanted a new lens design, sharper, faster, more accurate autofocusing, and that is in conjunction with the processor, and Fujifilm was able to accomplish that with this new lens. And so the number two thing is really you'll notice an improvement in autofocus speed, improvement in autofocus accuracy, to the point we can actually shoot talking head videos, which I showed on one of my last video. And just overall, just a better lens. It still has nice character. The old lens, although it wasn't sharp, wide open and up close, at medium distances, stopped down to f5.6, it was sharp enough. And I think a lot of us were reasonably happy with that lens. But now you got a much more versatile lens because it is sharp or wide open, so you could do more things and worry less about having to stop down if you don't have to. As well, this is WR, it is weather sealed. You do have to get the adapter, which is what's on here on the X100F, and it is the first, I forgot the name of the adapter, I'll put it down here, but it's just this little first part here that if you take the ring off and then you screw this on, and then Fujifilm recommends their adapter. And I did ask Billy, I said, Billy, do we have to buy your filter? And he said, look, I can't speak for other brands and other filters, but if you want it weather sealed and you want the warranty to be, proper, then get the Fujifilm. But I think if you got a good filter, a high quality filter from Heliopan or B+W or any of the pro filters that basically threads on nice and flush and sealed, you'll get weather sealing, right? But if you're really picky, you get the Fujifilm one. So you get this adapter, you put that filter on there, and then you have a fully weather sealed X100 V, and that's kind of what we've been asking for the longest time, is better lens, and we want WR, and we got those two. But then number three, we also got the articulating screen, which is it's a point of contention for some. They feel that this kind of takes away from the X100's sort of pedigree of it being more like a rangefinder camera. But I say, look, if you don't like it, then just don't use it, because they didn't make the camera much thicker, and it's just the only thing you notice is this little tab here that shows you, oh look, this thing articulates. But it really does open up a lot for you in terms of shooting certain styles. When you don't have an articulating screen, obviously you just adapt to it, but as soon as you get it, you realize there's a lot of things you can do that you just couldn't do, including YouTube videos. Or even photography, if you're doing sort of like flat lay and you're trying to shoot straight down, well, you have a screen now that you can just look straight at. Unlike the other cameras like the X-T3 and the X-H1, which I'm using to shoot this, the huge EVF pump is there. You can't fully see the screen. This, like the X Pro 3, is very flush, so you can shoot straight down either video or stills. And so I think it's a very functional piece of hardware improvement, and if it's not a big deal to you, then just don't use it, but it's there if you need it. And then as well, just all the other small little improvements over the X100V. Having this, I don't know why I have this flash on here. I just think it looks cool. And this is a leaf shutter lens. For those of you who don't know what that means, it means that the shutter is not a focal plane shutter. It's not over the sensor, but it is actually built into the lens. And so with that, you have much faster flash sync speeds, because the shutter is like the size of your tip of your pinky instead of the size of a little bit bigger than your thumb. And so you can flash sync not just to 1/250th of a second, which is a very common flash sync speed for all the little curtains, the little blades move out of the way, but this is so much smaller that you can flash sync right up to, I don't know if they recommend up to 1/4000th of a second, but you could do it, but safely up to 1/2000th of a second. So that's, and using any standard flash that has a center pin hot shoe connection. And so with this little EF X20 flash, you can flash sync f2. It has built-in mechanical neutral density filter that does not work for video, and I hope that Fujifilm will decide to put it in video, but if not, just put neutral density filters, screw it on for video if you wanted to, but for stills, no problem, right? You have that. So having these little improvements, including the ISO dial here now, this locks and stays up. I wish the X Pro 3, they thought of that before making the X Pro 3, but that's great. And I had mentioned in my other video that because my eyes are getting a little weaker as I get older for close focusing, I wouldn't have minded a little sort of magnification bubble instead of a gap, but you can move that to the front here with the press in and hold, and then what happens is you have different options that you can switch to, either if it's a shutter speed dial, aperture, as well as ISO, or other things that you set for here, right? So you have that. The X Pro 3 doesn't have it. So all those little things put together makes this a really nice improvement. So X100F, still a great camera. X100V, it is a better camera, minus a few things. So let's go over the cons now. So the first big con for people is the no D-pad. And a lot of us have gotten used to the D-pad. If you are like a DSLR shooter, I know a lot of guys that shoot with either Sony or Canon or Nikon, and their X100 is actually their family vacation camera, so it's not even competing with their main digital camera ecosystem. That, you know, those big cameras, including Fujifilm's big cameras, all have D-pads, and Fujifilm has decided for the sake of aesthetics to remove it. And so that is a negative for some. I like the D-pad not so much for navigation, because you could do everything, including going into menus, meaning you press menu and then you kind of joggle through, you kind of find your way through the menus using the joystick, and then you just press in for okay, right? And so you can do all that here, but what I do miss is the customizable 4 buttons. You can add swipe, but swipe is it's a hit and miss for me. I don't mind swipe maybe just to look at your photos, you just kind of swipe up, but other than that, or even using it as a focus joystick so you can do a quick selection of focus points. But other than that, I think it's up to you. I mean, I don't think if you really want this camera, that's the one thing that'll make you not buy it, but it's a hit and miss. I don't mind that it's gone. I can live with it. Another thing is, yes, the entire body is weather sealed, except for the lens, right? Except for the lens, there's a little bit of movement in and out in here, and to seal that fully, you have to get this adapter. And I think Fujifilm's thinking is they didn't want to have this adapter built in by default, which makes a thicker, longer body. So for those of you that didn't want, you know, they wanted that more compact pancake-like lens. It's not really pancake, because you could see that with that little circle in the line that shows you how far back the lens is. So the sensor is really, really far back in this body. So having this as a kind of a light, compact looking camera and functional camera, it's a big deal for Fujifilm. So those of you that want to keep that, then don't get the adapter, don't get weather sealing, but everything else is weather sealed, or like the EVF, the LCD, all the little connections, it is weather sealed other than that little front part of the lens. But I would recommend it, especially, it's not just about water, but it's also dust, humidity, moisture, that kind of stuff, cold, shooting in the cold, to have it sealed so that it can operate at optimum, right? So it is kind of recommend, I would recommend at least to have this, and if you're not going to always have a front filter, then just, you know, put the lens hood on here. The lens still makes noise as it zooms in and out. It's not horrible. Let's just see if I can. So you can hear that, right? You can hear it in video if you put the shotgun microphone here, or if you're using the built-in microphone. So again, I would recommend to have the microphone off camera and sort of use the little magic arm and a little super clamp and have it off to the side. But other than that, all the other X100s did make that noise. It would have been nice if that noise was gone, but I think it's just the overall design of the lens is just not possible, because remember, the entire shutter mechanism is attached to the lens itself, but you know, the different lens elements are probably moving, but it's still kind of in the way. So that's probably the reason why they made it as quiet. I think, is it quieter? Let's just, you know, that's a good test to see. Is it quieter? It just has a different it almost sounds like this X100F is actually quieter, but yeah, it's just the noise is there, and so out in the streets it's quiet enough, and the shutter will make more of a noise than the lens going in and out. So to me, it's not a big deal. And as well as that noise, if you think you're gonna get the same sort of autofocus performance as the Fujicron, the XF23 f2 RWR, you're not gonna get that. That lens is very quiet and very fast and very accurate. This is an improvement over the previous lens, but definitely not equal to the XF23. But as I mentioned before, this lens is actually sharper than the Fujicron XF23 f2. So hopefully we'll see an improvement on the Fujicron, the XF23 f2. As I mentioned in my unboxing and first impressions video, I still don't like having all the connections on the right side. I am happy that there is a HDMI out, because to do talking head video, you can put a monitor on top here and actually see yourself, and it's easy enough to do talking head. And when you have a monopod and this and an extra microphone and a monitor, I mean, it's a quick, easy kind of a, I don't want to say journalist. Actually, as a journalist, you could do a one-person video setup, really quick and easy to set up anywhere, shoot the video, and then move on to all your various points. I think this is a really great camera for that type of thing. But having all the ports on this side means you can't hold it while having all these plugs in, right? Your hand kind of gets in the way. So I do wish it was on this side, but I think the deep architecture of the X100 V, so whatever the frame inside here, the chassis and the circuitry is still the same as the X100F, right? So the processor, wherever it's in here, is in the same spot, and that's why all the X100s have always been on the right side. So that part of it, they probably couldn't change. A little bit of improvement on the bottom of the battery compartment, but again, I wish that the threaded tripod thread was more towards the center. So if you have a plate on here, plate for your tripod, that you can still open the battery compartment and swap out batteries without having to remove the plate all the time, as well as having the SD card reader on the side. That way, if this was moved to this side, then you could put SD cards on the side. So those are like little things that would make this more of a professional camera over more of a consumer camera. But these are little complaints. My final complaint is the converter lenses, not so much the wide angle. The 28 equivalent is fine. I wish it went to at least 24. I think if you have a camera that's 35 equivalent, to go from 35 to a 20 equivalent, it's not that much of a huge deal. I think this went to 24, and if it's a matter of size, Fujifilm saying, well, you know, this would be much bigger if this was a 24 f2 equivalent. Well, then make it a 24 f2.8 equivalent, right? Like the new XF 60mm f2.8. Well, have the same thing. Have it as a 60mm f2.8 to make it compact like this, and I think that would be a more functional wide angle converter. I do prefer the 28 over 35. Like if they made an X100V with an XF18 equivalent and super sharp and fast and everything, I'd be happy. But you know, at 35, I mean, this 23 f2 lens is what's gonna make most people happy, right? And everyone wants a Leica Q as a 35 lens, not as a 28 lens. And so, same thing, Fujifilm has made the right decision with the XF23, but for the wide angle converter, I wish it went to a 60mm wide, and the teleconverter, same thing, it has a 50mm equivalent, which is great. But I think they need to improve that, make it much smaller, and if it means it becomes an f2.8 or an f2.4 teleconverter lens, I don't think many people will complain. And so those are sort of the cons of this. None of them are really glaring cons, other than maybe no D-pad for some, not a big deal for me, and maybe having to get the adapter to make it fully weather sealed. But again, the adapter's not a lot of money, the filter's not a lot of money, it's not a big deal. Overall, this is a great camera. I don't see anyone being unhappy with it, but the question is, you know, where does this fit within this ecosystem of cameras for others other than those that are within the Fujifilm ecosystem, and as well comparing with the X Pro 3 and the X100F, you know, which one should people get? So let's move on to that now. All right, so who is this X100V for? Is it for me? Well, if I were to compare it with the X Pro 3, so this is mine, I own this X Pro 3, and there are reasons why, in the end, if I had to choose between these two, for myself, I would pick the X Pro 3 for various reasons. One of them is just the fact that it's interchangeable lens, right? I have a lot of vintage lenses. I have a lot of M mount lenses. I have a lot of Minolta A mount lenses. You may have other lenses in Nikon or Canon or some other brand, and it's fun to adapt vintage lenses to your camera body. And with this one, you have two adapters, so you don't have a lot of lens choices with the X100V. This you can pretty much, as long as you have an adapter, you can adapt it. So that's why I like the X Pro 3 over the X100V. I also do prefer the closed, hidden articulating screen. A lot of people hate this. A lot of people that really hate it have never tried it. And I think it's a more effective use of a articulating screen in a lot of ways. Some ways it doesn't work, like on a tripod with a plate, this can't go further down. It stays like this. So that's kind of an odd way of using it. You know, you have to go all the way down. But other than that, walking about on the streets, I'd rather have it closed and protected. I prefer it, but I think most people would prefer this style of articulating screen. And so if it comes down to these two cameras, guys, I say really, it has the same processor, it has the same sensor, but it comes down, and you know, they both have the hybrid EVF, OVF on here. Similar dials. This is slightly better. This has one extra dial feature, which is the front spinning dial actually presses in as a secondary button. This one, for some reason, Fujifilm removed it off the X Pro 3. So this actually has, for me, you can customize it better for the way I shoot. And finally, with the built-in lens, this actually works really well as a talking head video camera. So if you needed one camera, you like the 23mm f2, so 35mm equivalent, and you shoot talking head video or video, you have it on a tripod, and this has HDMI out, which the X Pro 3 doesn't. I don't know why Fujifilm removed it off the X Pro 3, but left it on the X100V, but that would be a make or break for some people who are hybrid shooters. If you are a hybrid shooter and you do sort of talking head videos or B-roll video, then this on a gimbal might work out awesome. And so that might be the one weird feature that would make someone choose this over this, because I've shown that you can shoot video. The autofocus is fast and accurate enough to use this for certain types of videos. So that might be the make or break. But for me personally, for what I own, I would choose the X Pro 3 because I like the versatility of this camera. But the pros, a couple more pros is, as I mentioned before, this is a leaf shutter lens. So the shutter is built into the lens, which allows for much faster flash sync. So if you're doing daylight flash sync type photography, which I enjoy doing, then put a low powered flash like this and shoot at f2, and there you go, right? Flash sync up to 1/4000th of a second, ideally probably 1/2000th of a second, and you got your shot at low flash power, right? So that's a big advantage of shooting with a leaf shutter equipped camera like this, as well as a Ricoh GR series, as well as a Leica Q series, all leaf shutter cameras. Now, compared to the older X100F, this is a more difficult question because, you know, you're going to pay premium to move up from here to here. In terms of image quality, guys, I actually kind of like the older sensor, the 24 megapixel sensor. I personally feel because the base ISO on this is 640, and the base ISO on this is 800. For some things, like for video, having a lower ISO is better, but for stills, because the base ISO is 800, at 3200, it's a third stop less pushed from base. And so at ISO 3200, I actually feel that you're actually getting slightly better IQ out of the older processor sensor combination versus the newer processor sensor combination. So in terms of image quality, other than getting the new simulations, I think equal, and even I would give a slight advantage to the older setup. But other than that, you're getting weather sealing, you're getting an articulating screen, you're getting improved autofocus, you're getting an improved lens. And so is it worth paying that extra for you? If you're happy with the X100F, I say just stick with it. I'm personally, as I mentioned, between the X Pro 3 and the X100V, I would pick my X Pro 3. And because I'm keeping my X Pro 3, there's no need for me to buy an X100V as well because I already have an X100F, right? And so for me, I'm keeping these two because I already own it, and I'm not going to get an X100V. Maybe for you, this is your only camera and you want improved video, you want an articulating screen, you're going on vacation, you want weather sealing, then it probably is worth it because you're still gonna get a decent price on this camera used, because this is not selling that cheaply still used on the used market, right? So I would say, you know, if this is your primary camera, upgrade. If this is your secondary camera, you don't shoot video, you like the way it shoots, you like the IQ, I say just stick with it. And finally, I'm gonna compare it with the GFX 50S with the 45 to 100. Which one should you get? I'm kidding. You shouldn't have to be choosing between these two cameras. I just have this for review, so I just thought, as a joke, I'll just have that on there. And so in the end, guys, overall, very, very happy with the X100V. I am loath to return it. I am loath that I couldn't spend more time shooting, but like a lot of you guys, we are now self-isolating. I wasn't going to run around my studio or my home and take pictures of my toilet or plants. I don't have any pets. And I could kind of sneak out at night and take pictures, but I thought, you know, for the sake of this review, you guys know from my other pictures and using my other cameras, I'm gonna be just shooting the same sort of style, but let's just say that the lens is spectacular on this. I really like this camera for talking head video, which seems odd, but for a YouTuber like me to set up very quickly on a monopod and, you know, anywhere fast and shoot a quick YouTube video, having something small, light, and compact like this is fine. You'll be able to shoot 4K. Yes, it gets warm. I've shot 4K with this. Yes, it gets warm, but look how small this camera is. The heat that's produced from this is normal because this is so small. The heat sinks are so tiny. It can't dissipate heat fast enough. So, of course, it's going to get warm. And that's why they have all the limits on how long you can shoot 4K video on here. It's because of those issues. But, you know, you're not buying this camera for 4K. I mean, if you need it, you have it, and you can only shoot it in smaller little bursts, but once it resets, you just restart shooting it again, so it's not a big deal for me. But having this weather sealed, I mean, this is the perfect all-in-one camera. A few people have asked, should I pick the X100V or the Leica Q? And I say, look, it's like trying to choose between a Ferrari and a Lexus. In the end, if you want the bang for your buck, get the Lexus, right? Japanese made, high enough quality, in many ways will outperform the Ferrari in certain areas, but in the end, the Lexus makes more sense. But if you want a Ferrari, you want a Ferrari. There's no way convincing someone who's going to buy a Ferrari to buy a Lexus, no matter how much you argue with them. So same thing with the X100V. I'm not going to argue with someone who really wants a Leica Q. If you want a Leica Q, get a Leica Q. It's a great camera. Just remember, it's much bigger, it's heavier, the lens sticks out quite a bit more. It's a 28 lens instead of a 35 equivalent lens. It does not have an articulating screen, right? So those things alone, and I like the hybrid viewfinder on here. So in many ways, the Fujifilm is better than the Leica Q. But if you want a Q, you want a Q, you want the full frame, you want that really nice Leica optics on there. This optics is also very nice. And with the film simulations, I would argue that straight out of camera JPEGs, out of the X100 will look much better than the Leica Q. They're standard, the look out of the Leica Q is fine, as well as that new sensor is a little bit noisy. I did test the Leica SL2, which has the same EVF, the same sensor, same processor, very similar to the Leica Q. And I found that because of that 47 megapixel sensor on there, that at high ISO, it seemed noisier than I was happy with. I actually prefer the 32 ISO on here over the Leica SL. And that's just me. And so, between those two cameras, I say bang for your buck. Get the Lexus. Get the Fujifilm X100V. And that's about it. Oh, just in case, because I always get people asking me, this is Clever Supply that has they use the Peak Design straps, the strap connecting system. I forgot what they call it. But it's a nice way of, if you have two cameras, like I have the X Pro 3 with it as well, so I can have one strap and use it on two camera bodies, as well as it often, when you throw it in a camera bag, it stores a little less messy when you have this type of system, but I prefer this system on lighter cameras. So Clever Supply Company, and this strap works fantastic on the X100V, and I'll leave links down below. So thank you so much for watching. I will ask for a long-term review copy, and who knows, maybe one day eventually I will sell this or give this away to someone, because if, you know, camera girl, someone says, I want this camera, then all of a sudden I have a reason to buy another camera. And then I would be choosing between the GR3 and the X100V, and maybe I'll do a review on that one day, but not today. So we'll see you next time, and happy shooting. Peace.